Basically, basically, all right. So basically, I think that all right. So I think that this is my problem. All right, listen to this. I think that this is my problem. This might be others' problems as well. Might be. If it's your problem too, it probably isn't. You probably figured this out by now, but I haven't. I just not figured it out. Or at least I figured out a really, a more focused way of saying it. I figured out that this idea in particular is one that's worth focusing on. Okay, so I'm a person. I've got a body. I've got, I've got a skeleton and muscles and skin, and I'm here on this world, and I wake up, and then I go, and then I live my, and then I wake up, and then I do what's I I follow my intuition or whatever. I do what I do whatever it is that I'm going to do. Then I go to sleep, and you have about 13 or 14 hours a day, 15, maybe 16, maybe. You've got some hours per day. You got some amount of hours per day. Look, so I'm in my 20s, right? You say, an average person is gonna be alive for a long time. 80, we'll call it 80 years. 80 years. We'll call it 80 years. You say, wow, that's 80 years, wow. There's a lot you can do in 80 years. Wrong. There's absolutely nothing you can do in 80 years. 80 years is a very short period of time for one person. Maybe it's longer if you can team up with people, get more things done. But you're just a person. You're just what's not a long time? 10 years. You know what's not a long time? 1 year. What did you do when you were 25? What did you do when you were 23? What did you do when you were 30? It's the answer's supposed to be a lot, okay? It's supposed to be, you're supposed to, it's supposed to be a lot, but it can't be that much because you're only one person. It can't be a lot. It's supposed to be a lot. And it is a lot for people who are very focused and who have the rest of their life, who are able to focus, who don't have anything anything else they have to worry about, who don't have just external things that nag at them all the time. People who can just people who can just people who've got like the rest of their life on lockdown and are able to focus on what they need to do. Those people do a lot. Those people get to say, I started 3 companies when I was 30. I started 3 companies in the year that I turned 30. Those are the people who say, I wrote 2 books. I wrote 5 books in a year. Because it's because they don't have to think about any other part of their lives. It's because they know they're able to focus because they know who they are. They're able to focus. They're able to act authentically and singularly because they have an identity that they are acting in accordance with. You know, a person who writes 5 books in a year probably is doing so under the impression that they are a writer, that they're an author. They have an identity and they're acting according to that identity. Like, you're not going to start three companies in a year and say, "Oh no, I'm just a guy." No, it's your identity, and it's your singular identity. A person. That's my problem. Is I have too many. Um, um, too many identities of my too many ideas in my identities in my idealization of myself. I'm what I want to do is more than I can do in my whole life. And it's not even that much. I like it. It's not that much. And there are a lot of different identities, a lot of different sort of binaries that I find myself to be caught between. There was, when I was in the 8th grade, my science teacher told me that I was the stupidest smart person she'd ever met, or something like that. Because I was smart, but I was also, and it's true. I'm caught in the middle of a lot of these extremes. I find. Man, I thought of a bunch of them before. I'm caught in the middle of these extremes. The one that I can think of, I'm sort of embarrassed. It's like the gayest straight person that you've met. And I use that as a technical term, gay, because, like, in my view, it's not. It doesn't strictly refer to men who like men, who are attracted to men. That's not what that word means. It means happy, okay? It means, like, it does mean happy, and it means happy in a very frivolous way, and a very, in a way that That's not very serious. And that's how I see that's what it means to me. It's that basically gay people like aren't expected to have children, and since they're not going to have children, their lives aren't as important. I don't I, in a way, like their actions don't have as much of an impact on the future, and so they don't act with that same gravity and seriousness. They don't, and you can tell they're very. Anyway, but it's the same thing with lots of other things. Basically, any time that you're not, that's what I call, that's the word that I use to describe really anything that you do that's frivolous and doesn't do anything, like my video game addiction or whatever. Like that's gay. If you're like if you don't want like if you don't see yourself having children in the future, and you live your life for the purpose of your own pleasure, you are gay. Okay, that's what that word means to me. I'm not. I'm referring to a separate denotation of the word. If I'm using that word correctly, denotation. Like they've got the derogatory term breeder for straight people. Like it's somehow it kind of reminds me of the term wage slave, but worse. Because like that's a real thing. Most of the time, companies don't need to exist, and if you're just there so that they'll give you money for doing nothing useful, like that's different. Like if your job is important and makes a difference, then you're not a wage slave. So you don't get to use it in the same derogatory way, but like having a derogatory term for people who perpetuate your species, that's um, it just goes to show how deeply they believe that the future doesn't matter. How it's like they think that living a life in such a way it, it's like it's like having a derogatory term for anyone who just behaves responsibly. I don't know. I need to figure out how to word that. Anyway, that's what that word means. I didn't mean to get that took too long. I'm sorry. That took too long. You know, I'm like the poorest rich person, you know. I'm sort of a victim of these conflicting APs. I don't want to say victim. I'm just I I haven't had a very consistent life. You know, if I were poor, then I would know that I'm poor. I I guess that's just it's just the system, man. It's like you know, you're poor and they make you think you're rich so you don't do anything about it, you know. And that is what it is. That's how I see the other students here. I see them as having had much more consistent lives. So they have a notion of who they are, what they're supposed to do, just out of virtue of having been in the same place their whole life. It's like that part in the beginning of Catch 22 where Yosarian is in the hospital or whatever, the ward, the sick ward. I forget the word. He had this liver condition that looked like jaundice, but it wasn't jaundice, but it looked like jaundice. He had all the symptoms of jaundice, but his temperature wasn't high enough for the doctors to treat it. So he just sat there. He just stayed in the hospital. It said if it wasn't jaundice, he said, well, if it went away, then he could go. And if it became jaundice, they could treat it. But this just being short of jaundice all the time confused them. And it's like that. If I were rich, if I weren't poor, then I'd be able to move forward with confidence in my life situation. And if I were poor, I'd be able to focus on that. But my just being short of poor is really confusing. And it's the same way with a lot of other things. Like if I was poor, then if I'm not poor, then I can focus on my studies and not worry about my family. And if I am poor, then I can make the choice of focusing on my studies, knowing that I can't help, or drop out and work to support my family. But this just short of being poor means that I stay in school, but I'm just worried about my family all the time, and I'm distracted from my work. It needs to be a decision, a made decision. It needs to be something that I can be confident about. It needs to be, a part of your identity that you can act in accordance with. Life is too short to try to live according to multiple identities. I can't pretend to be some smart person when my grades are falling, and I can't whatever, I'm tired.